Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov, whichever it is when you're seeing this video. What is the secret to winning the battles in life? The answer may be in a sentence we say in the daily prayers, that God is Oseh Milchamot, He does battles. Zorea Tzedakot, He plants kindnesses. Matzmiyach Yeshuot, He causes salvations, victories in those battles of life, individual, communal, or national. And He causes those victories, those salvations, to blossom forth as the result of that process. What is that process? Wars, planting kindnesses, and then salvations blossoming from the earth. We will find that perhaps in the context of the beautiful story in this week's Parsha, poignant, personal, humorous at times, and certainly romantic, of Abraham sending Eliezer to find a wife for Isaac from his family back in Mesopotamia. And the first question we must ask is, why? Why send Eliezer to Mesopotamia? According to the rabbis, Eliezer had a very nice daughter, and she was growing up in Abraham's house, so she was monotheistic, she followed the faith. What was wrong with her? Why can't she marry Isaac? Why go all the way back to Mesopotamia? Question number one. Question number two. Eliezer seems to violate a Torah prohibition on seeking signs and portents. One is not allowed to pay attention to the black cat that crosses one's path, or to the Friday the 13th date, or to stepping on the cracks in the sidewalks. This is all superstition. One is not supposed to believe in superstition. That if the Yankees win by more than 3 runs today, so then I'm going to invest in ExxonMobil stock. No, one is not allowed to do that, seeking signs for these kinds of things. And yet Eliezer seems to do exactly this. When he arrives at the well back in Mesopotamia, he says, "The girl that I ask her to give me water, and then she responds by giving me water and then giving my camels to drink, that is the girl that I will bring home for Isaac." In other words, if I say X and she responds Y and does what she says Y and Z, gives myself and the camels, that's it. So that seems to be a superstitious seeking of some kind of a sign or a portent. But it is not, as we will explore. A third question. So the Torah tells us this whole beautiful story, how Rebecca then comes out, and indeed she gives Eliezer to drink, and then she runs and draws more water and gives to his camels, and then he of course knows it's her, and he gives her the ring, and it's all wonderful. And then he comes to the house, or the tent, of Betuel and Lavan and Rebecca's family, and tells them the whole story again. Now the rabbis ask about this, why the whole story again? Goodness gracious, we learn lots of laws from the mitzvot, from an extra letter, from a verbal similarity, from an a fortiori logical reasoning. We learn out details about how to fulfill all the commandments from practically nothing in the written Bible, and yet here we're hearing a whole story that we already pretty much know, with a couple of minor changes, okay, but it's pretty much stuff that we already know. Why do I need to hear this again? So the rabbis learn an important lesson, and they say, we see from this repetition, the fact that it's written, that it is nicer, yafeh, it is nicer, it is better to learn to read the sicha, the speeches, the conversations of the servants of the patriarchs. That's better than even the Torah, the halachic discussions of the descendants of the patriarchs, of the great rabbis. In other words, Eliezer's speech has more value for us than all of the drashot of the Mishnayot, of the rabbis of the Mishnah, for example. Wow, that's quite an assertion. What exactly are we learning from hearing Eliezer's repetition of his whole story, which we more or less knew? Why is this even more important than learning halacha, which we get from an extra letter, an extra this? Why not expound and expand upon the halachic discussions? So there is something very powerful about these discussions of the servants of the patriarchs, and I'll tell you what I think it is. Because the Torah of the descendants, these halachic discussions, are all answering a simple question: what is the din? What is the law? What am I supposed to do? So as long as I get that information, even if it's from just an extra letter or an extra word or a different way of phrasing it, that's enough. I know what the law is. But we learn from this story, what is life? What is life? That's a much more important question. And indeed, the rabbis say that derech eretz kadma Torah, that the character of a person, derech eretz is interpreted by many to mean a livelihood, but it's also interpreted by others to mean character. They learn it out in the Midrash from that the angels, after Adam sinned by eating from the tree of knowledge, that the angels were there to guard the derech eitz hachayim, the way to the tree of life. Derech, that is derech eretz, that is character. Eitz hachayim is the tree of life, that's the Torah. So derech eretz comes before Torah. Another Mishnah says that Yafet Talmud Torah im derech eretz, that Talmud Torah study together with derech eretz, with ethical teachings. And then again, the same machloket, do we interpret derech eretz to mean a livelihood? Many rabbis do, but the Tiferet Yisrael by Rabbi Yisrael Lifshitz, the Rav of Danzig in the 19th century, he says, no, it's referring to character. That without character development, then Torah study will not be effective in causing a person to forget sin. It won't be sufficient. If Torah is just an intellectual exercise, it will have no impact upon one's character. They have to work in parallel on their character in order to truly be forgetting sin, to be living on a higher level of righteousness. So therefore, the first thing we are learning is that it is not important how much Torah, or even if the bride for Isaac is monotheistic. Rebekah is growing up in the house of Bethuel and Lavan. These are pagans. These are idolaters. But Abraham knows that they have good character. And the Canaanite women do not. And the most important thing is characters. Derech eretz. Without that derech eretz, without that character, one will never achieve success with Torah in living a life free from sin. Character is king. Because theology and belief systems, they can be changed. Rebecca will very quickly become a great matriarch, a prophetess. But if she wouldn't have had good character, then none of that would have been worth anything. So Abraham says to Eliezer, with all due respect to your daughter, she may be a wonderful girl. She's growing up in Canaanite society here, and there is a collective ethos of that society that is alien to the Torah that I am going to be bringing in the world. Whereas the character traits of my family back in Mesopotamia is attuned and in line with that Torah. So therefore it must be from there. Good. So now we can understand how Eliezer is not violating superstition at all. He's asking God not for a sign, but rather for a test of character. Is this woman Rivka, or Rebecca, as she will come out to be, is she somebody who is gomelet chasadim? Does she do acts of kindness? And therefore that's seen not just by her giving him to drink, but also getting for his camels. That's not just kindness. It's also in Hebrew what we call a rosh gadol, meaning somebody who takes a look at the big picture, somebody who takes responsibility and says, well, if he's thirsty, then the camels all the more so are going to be thirsty. In other words, somebody whose kindness is completely focused on the other. And I saw a beautiful explanation from the Beit HaLevi, from the great Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, the grandfather of the great grandfather, of the more contemporary Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who says that we see that Rebecca was even sensitive to Eliezer's feelings. How so? Because she gave him water to drink, and then she could have taken that very same water and poured it for the camels. But no, the Torah says she went to draw fresh water for the camels. Why is that significant? Because had she poured the water that she had just given Eliezer to drink for the camels, Eliezer might have been insulted. He might have said, oh, the water that I drank from is now defiled, so you're pouring it for the camels. So she's going to keep that water and say it's absolutely fine, and I'll get fresh water for the camels, so as not to insult Eliezer. This is the level of sensitivity that Rivka had. This is the character, and therefore character is king. And we can also see this in the fact that Eliezer is repeating the story, because there's a very famous social psychologist. His name is Robert Cialdini. And Cialdini posits that what is focal is causal. That if a person is focused on something for a long time or more intensely, then it causes them to change their opinion and to change perhaps their behavior. So therefore, if we would just see that the Torah says, and Eliezer repeated the story, that would have had less impact. When we go in with the words and we hear how he talks, with his enthusiasm, with his faith, every other word is God did kindness and guided me on the proper path. That is making it focal. We pay attention to this story because it is long, because it is detailed, because it is beautiful, and it is personal, and therefore it has a greater impact on our character, and character is king. And by the way, I would add to this, that what is the good character we're looking for? Well, the Torah tells us, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," one must love one's neighbor as oneself. How does one do this? I believe that one can interpret it very simply. If you wish to love yourself, you must love your neighbor. In other words, ve'ahavta l'reacha, if you love the other, kamocha, then you will love yourself. Because we are created not for ourselves. We are not created in order to eat and to enjoy life. We're created to make a contribution. And this is exactly what Eliezer says when his hosts, Betuel and Lavan, want him to sit down and eat. Have a meal first. Sounds very Jewish, right? Eat first, eat first. He says, no. I will not eat until I have spoken my words, because the purpose is not the eating. The purpose is the mission, and Eliezer was on a mission, and therefore he had to do that first. So we learn here that character, kindness, is focused on the mission, on the other. How do I contribute? How do I improve? How do I help? That is the character that Abraham knows must be present in the woman that Isaac is going to marry. I don't know when I heard this, but I believe it's a metaphor, a story that really illustrates this point about how this is the true essence of our nature, the need to make contribution. A very wealthy man from someplace, let's say in the West Coast, California, Los Angeles, or whatever, of America, is very rich. He takes a trip, he comes to New York City, and he's on the Circle Line going around Manhattan, and they're sailing on the East River. Now, the East River, if you know, is a pollution monster. There's all kinds of sewage and refuse and dead bodies. Who knows what's floating in the East River? And there, as he's going around, a child falls overboard into the East River. The child doesn't know how to swim. This man throws off his shoes, jumps into the East River, and then saves the child. Then he goes back to his hotel and takes about 20 showers and spends the next week cleaning himself off with perfumes and all kinds of cleansers. And then this person, in the course of their years, very wealthy, takes cruises, goes around the world, here, there, everywhere. Talking at a later stage in life, one of his grandchildren asks him, "Can you tell us, Grandpa, the most memorable, you've traveled so far, what was the most memorable trip you ever took?" "The time I saved the kid from the East River." Right? It had been an extremely disgusting experience for him, but that experience was contributing. And that is what a person really takes home. That is what life is about. And that's what Eliezer is teaching us. That's what he looks for in Rivka. She has that idea, that sense of contributing. If you wish to love yourself, you have to love others, because that is the way to do it. That is how you discover what you were created for. Now the acts of kindness that we have in the Parsha seem to be relatively small and insignificant. But Rabbi Avraham Twersky tells us an important lesson. We see that from these small and insignificant seeming incidents, just making a match for Isaac, we don't have this kind of a story with Abraham. We don't even know how he found Sarah. But here we're getting all kinds of details of this story. Why? Because this match is going to change history. And sometimes it's the small things, the small acts of kindness that can change the course of history. The great Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik explains that the UN was created. It had its reason for existence for one reason only: to give legitimacy to the establishment of the State of Israel. Since then, the UN is completely worthless, or nowadays when we read the news, worse than worthless. But it had that purpose. There was a man standing in the field. Joseph has been sent to find his brothers, and the man sees Joseph is looking around. The brothers aren't where he thought they were going to be. So the man says, "What are you looking for?" And Joseph says, "I'm looking for my brothers." And the man gives him directions. He helps out a person who was lost. He does a small act of kindness. Because of that act, Joseph found the brothers. The brothers saw him. They sold him to slavery. Israel went down to Egypt, emerged with the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea, and received the Torah, and the entire course of history was changed by that one act of doing a favor to a lost young man in the fields somewhere near Shechem. We never know what small act of kindness can bring about the blossoming of salvations. And therefore that is what the tefillah is saying to us. So, Semil Chamot, God is teaching us to do battle in life. The battles of life are won by Zorei Tzedakot, by planting a seed of a kindness, even a seemingly insignificant one, that will bring a blossoming of salvation. So when we focus our lives on the others and doing more and more chesed, doing more and more kindnesses, every small act, you never know which one is going to change the course of history and bring about the redemption. Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov.